Welcome, everybody, to Midday Magazine for this Friday, December 6th, 2024. I have your host, James J. Malouf, with you. In part two today, we're going to speak with Phil Brown and Liz Stern from the Southfield County Historical Museum. We're going to talk about their famous Christmas tree walk. Looking forward to that. Always fun talking with Phil. Always a good conversation with our Wisconsin State Representative, Scott Krug. Scott is with us on the phone right now. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
Doing good. Appreciate you being here with us, Scott. Always being able to make the time. I know that we've talked about this over the years, whether it's you pulling over at Pritzel's so that you could get the call into us or whatever it takes, you always seem to make it work. We really appreciate that, and our listeners really do. And especially now, we haven't gotten to talk to you since the election. Want to congratulate you on being reelected. How did that feel?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you always put in as much work as you can, and when it pays off, it's good. I mean, and I'm excited to get back to work here in Madison, and we've been grinding the gears already. Got back, the week after the election. Actually, the day after the election, I was already down to the Capitol and getting ready again for the next iteration here.
Scott, we'll talk more about that in a moment, but I also wanted to tag that with the fact that you were also elected to leadership. You will be the Assistant Majority Leader in the 25-26 session. What does that mean for you, both personally and work-wise?
Yeah, I think just kind of seeing where we were on, the numbers in the chamber and seeing how close the majorities are, and knowing that there's going to need to be some more level-headed leadership and cooperation and coordination between the parties. I decided to run for leadership, and taking on this role is going to be a change. I'm not going to chair a committee anymore. I'm not going to do the normal type of day-to-day type stuff, but it'll be more behind the scenes, working with both parties to create an agenda and get bills across the chambers over to the Senate and help them understand why we need to do things. So it's a new challenge. It's exciting. It's something I've thought about doing for quite a long time, and now finally pulled the trigger and got it done.
And congratulations on that. And I have to tell you, though, one of the more unsurprising things to happen in this political cycle to me, having gotten to work with you for years and having these conversations with you, I see you, and I hope this isn't a bad thing. I see you as a very purple person, a purple candidate. And I understand that I would say the majority of things, if not all of them, you tend to lean towards the Republican side. But I do think that you are a style of Republican that we around in this area, certainly in central Wisconsin and in your districts, they're more familiar with than maybe some. And I certainly think that you are able. Do you like how I worded that one, man? I danced around that one.
You sound like a politician.
It might have a future. No, I don't. One of the things that I appreciate about you is that, and with that, there's every once in a while there's crossovers with you and Senator Testin with questions that I have, and one of the things I asked him, I don't really feel I need to ask you because, and not to say that Senator Testin hasn't done this himself, but you've done this overwhelmingly of reaching across the aisle, of representing people even that didn't vote for you. That's important to you, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and it shows in, just even the election results from when I started with the 47% win in a three-way race to now being a 64% seat. I mean, it's not just because of the map lines. It's because of the job that I do and the way that I do it. And I think just the way we ran the campaigns and elections committee last session is going to start showing more widespread across the Capitol. The people are going to start acting that way, understanding that they have to work together to get something actually done. So I think it was a good start, and I think being in leadership, I can foster that a little bit more.
It speaks to also why you've been reelected, the times that you have and everything. I think it's an important note. And I take that, piggybacking off of that, into your plans for this next term, especially with the new leadership role and everything. Does that change your plans? Does it, or still full steam ahead?
Yeah, when you chair a committee, we have a rule in the assembly that if you're a chair, you can't author a bill in your area. You're just more the referee on a bill. So I think for me on my agenda on elections issues, I get to be more of a bill author, a little bit more in-depth on putting together the policy instead of being the referee and somebody bringing it to me in my committee. And I think that's going to also help me find other legislators who are newer to the process. Maybe it's some of the freshmen, maybe some of the Democrats who I can help coach in that area and help them understand they need to build a knowledge on this so we can either A, fix problems that exist, or B, fix perceptions that they're were problems that needed to be fixed. And I just just got back from D.C. Yesterday, and did a couple of panel discussions for different groups, and just still talking about election stuff at every stop. And being a respected leader nationwide on election integrity is something I take to heart.
When it comes to that, Scott, and I saw that you were doing that yesterday a bit, and it's part of the reason I wanted to ask this next question. And I don't do curveball questions. I don't do gotcha stuff or anything like that. So I don't mean anything like that with this. But I am curious because I love asking that political brain of yours questions like this. A couple of days ago, Democrats won the final U.S. House race. That is going to keep it from Republican control. But coming out of the election, whether it's the presidency or Senate, Republicans took over quite a bit. It was quite a red sweep. When one party has so much control, what happens then? And I say this in the sense of because both parties do this of when they are not in control. Hey, that's wrong. Hey, this is wrong. Calling things out and that. And now with this being the case, what happens then when you see that happening? Do you see this as a positive for the country? And I don't mean this as a Republican or Democrat thing. I mean one party having so much control over another.
I mean, if you look at the numbers in the U.S. House, where Republicans are going to have maybe a 2, maybe a 3-seat majority, you compare it to what we have going on now in the state assembly, where we still have a decent majority of 9 seats. But even then, for us, you can lose maybe 4, maybe 5 before a bill doesn't get done if you don't bring a Democrat vote over. In Congress, they're going to be able to lose 2, maybe 3 without being able to get a bill done without Democrats. So if somebody's got a really big priority and there's people in their party that don't like it, they're going to have to make it work for a Democrat or 2 to vote for a bill. And it's a different style of politics than a lot of Republicans or Democrats who are currently in office are understanding of or able to procure those. So I think it brings a different skill set to the forefront. And I think it's more of the and I always like to compare it to being more of a Tommy Thompson type person, and understanding that, yes, you have your principles, you know the way things have to end up, but you also have to figure out a way to get them done. If that means you add something here or there to help bring a Democrat or 2 aboard, you're going to have to do it. So it gives the minority party more of a say. They may not always still get their way, but they'll have much more of a say both here in the Assembly and over in the U.S. Capitol. So it's just a different skill set that matters more now.
Yeah, going back to even Lincoln and before that, you had reaching across the aisle. You had Lincoln filling his cabinet with people that ran against him and these kind of things. And we've always seen it as important, but I don't know if you could say that it's ever been more important, or it hasn't been as important since then to have that in this country. I don't see, and the numbers show this, that we are not as divisive as people might think. But the election results kind of, I think, fed that monster, if you will, of this divisiveness and everything. And I think that's all the more important for our leaders like yourself and other your teammates over there, if you will, to really approach this that way. And regardless of who, how you might feel even personally about some things, to show goodwill and to show the reaching across the aisle and how things are done. And as I've mentioned many times, whether it's fair or not, the responsibility on Wisconsin politicians, especially when it comes to this, because we are that purple state. There's no getting around it now. Every political cycle pretty much going forward, at least for the time being, it does seem like they are going to have all eyes on Wisconsin. They are going to be focusing on this state. And where it lands.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you'll see, especially in Congress, and the reason I bring that up is just having been there the last couple of days, hearing the buzz and feeling what it feels like in D.C. this week. I think it would be really smart for the Democrats on day one to bring forward a bill that they talked about during the campaign cycle that President Trump was behind, like saying, no more taxes on tips. If I was the minority leader in the U.S. House, I would have a Democrat in my team write that bill and bring it to the floor and say, hey, this is what you guys talked about. We agree with it. Let's pass the bill. Mm-hmm. It's a small enough thing, but it really sets the tone for the whole session to say, hey, there were things that we agreed upon the last 6 months when we were yelling and screaming at each other about these campaigns, but these are the things that we can actually get done that we'll support. Let us write the bill, and you guys pass our bill, and let's just figure out how to actually work together. I don't know if that's going to happen, obviously, but I just think there's some things that could set that tone and try to get some actual things back home done. Because in a 2-year cycle, we literally get maybe 12, 13 months out of those 2 years actually get, policy drafted and done and budgets created and passed and done. And then that campaign season starts creeping in already. So it's a shorter thing than 2 years because we're not always, sitting at the capitals for those 2-year cycles. So especially for us and for Congress, who all have 2-year terms, pressure to get stuff done starts now. And the only way to get stuff done is working together to get it done.
Your colleagues, you're on the clock. You're so right about that. And I think not only do I agree with whether people agree with the bill or not, the idea of getting a bill across the aisle or across the finish line that it has both has bipartisan support and everything. You're right. That is a very good idea right now, I think, and something that can show connection with our. The more unified we come across, the more unified we are, the more unified we come across to the rest of the world. And whether people realize that or not, that's important. That matters. And especially, and more importantly, of course, to our fellow Americans to show this, but just as much to the rest of the world to show, hey, we're the ones that made democracy, what it is. And this is how democracies work. And especially in the way the world is right now. We're speaking with Representative Scott Krug. And Scott, I mentioned the representative part in part because of the new district boundaries that are going on. You have lost some, you have gained some. Can you go through that for us?
Yeah, because that officially kicks in with inauguration on January 6th. The new 72nd Assembly District is no more in Waushara County, no more in Portage County. So I've got the South Wood County I've kept. I've added little bits of areas here in Wood County, such as Babcock, and that way up towards Pittsville. Then it goes south from there into Juneau County, all the way down to Camp Douglas and the Germantown area, if you're familiar with the southern part of Castle Rock Lake over there, and the Dirty Turtle and Portofino's and all those cool little bars on the southern tip of Castle Rock. That's now my area, and you cross back over 21 and picked up a little bit more in Adams County, so just south of, I basically tell people the entirety of Castle Rock Lake, all of Petenwell, when you're looking at Adams and Juneau County for the district, whatever's touching that lake on either side is now mine. So it adds Adams and Friendship also. I do lose some eastern Adams County, so as soon as I get out of Rome heading towards Coloma, I don't even have the edge of Adams County over there anymore, so we saw Adams County get sliced up, and now Adams has got 5, state reps that represent it instead of just 1 or 2 now. So it's a little chopped up, but I think in the end it fits really well with, the ideas that I've had. I've gone a lot from vegetable production area in Waushara County to picking up a lot more cranberries and a lot more cows. So the type of agriculture changes, but it's still a pretty agricultural and tourism district.
What for you, and again, just your perspective, what for you are the positives and negatives of this?
Well, I think for me, it's I had to learn a lot about Waushara County when I first inherited that in the 2012 map. But for me in Juneau County, it's such a natural fit. I spent so much time in Juneau at the end of the 90s and 2000s in law enforcement and corrections, and knew a lot of the people over there already and kept those relationships up for a while. So it's a pretty natural fit for me. It also includes my ancestral homelands up there in the little area of Altdorf here near Vesper that my great-great-grandparents came to in the 1920s. So it's a lot more of the ancestral area that I grew up in and old family names that I recognize and know. So I think it couldn't be any better of a district for me the way it ended up, actually.
It's interesting too, and with this change, of course, others are the way that this is going. It looks like this is going to be set for now, or how long is this going to be set, Scott?
Man, you asked some good questions. So the way that we've seen maps change so often because of court decisions or courts flipping, there is an outside possibility that the Supreme Court race in April could put that back on the docket. There are plenty of us, though, that feel like now that we actually took a bill and we're not forced by a court to do it, we wrote the governor's office wrote the bill, we passed their maps, he signed it into law. So there's plenty of legal theory that says once you pass a redistricting bill, you can only do it once every 10 years. So I'm under the impression that even if the Supreme Court flips back in early 2025, that these maps are in place until 2030.
Okay. Scott, the last kind of question I have for you before we get into some winter meeting talk that we always like to wrap up with some baseball, I want to discuss a tough one, the unknown. We don't know who will chair which committees in the Assembly or Senate. We're not certain who will be members of which committees right now. So how are you and your colleagues handling that? How is the atmosphere there with when it comes to that one in Madison?
Well, it's a weird little anecdote because the first role that the assistant majority leader gets is to conduct all the office moves. And the way the office moves work at the Capitol, it's based on who's in leadership, who's got seniority, and we go from there. So one of the things that we had to do this last 2 weeks in all these office moves is, besides listening to people complain that we lost a lot of seats because the Democrats won a lot of seats, was trying to figure out where we're going to be putting people who might end up on the Joint Finance Committee or people who might need an extra space for more staff in their offices. So we had to go through all of the office moves without knowing who these people are going to be yet, because there's some question when you have a 54 to 45 majority, do the current leaders that get elected in their caucuses have enough votes to get elected on the floor? I think we're kind of waiting to make sure that all of that's settled before we start assigning committee chairs and picking people for the Joint Finance Committee. So all the office moves that we did, we may have to move again, depending on how actual elections for the Speaker and for the Speaker Pro Tem go on Inauguration Day. So it might be a while before we know who chairs committees yet.
With that, I feel that we have another almost standstill going, or not standstill, but we're kind of stuck a little bit, and things can't get going, get in motion, and going back to what we were talking about, getting work done and getting bills passed. Is there some, I don't want to say pressure, but is there some kind of like, hey, we should get this done, get this figured out so we can get to work?
Yeah, I think, it's fair to say that anybody who's returning as a sophomore, quote, or senior member is going to have a committee. Most of them who have had their committees already are going to keep their committees. So I think most of that's figured out. I think, when I vacated campaigns and elections, that's an open spot. We lost somebody who on the Joint Finance Committee to retirement, so that's an open spot. So there aren't really a lot of open spots. It's just getting technically assigned to those positions for people, because incoming freshmen don't get committee chairs yet because they're just getting there to learn. So basically anybody who's coming back knows that they will have an area of something that they work in and understand. So I think we're pretty well set. It's just the final announcement of those things. So it's not much of a standstill on anything, actually.
Scott, do you guys do white Christmas gifts? Do you guys around the office or around the Capitol or anything? Do you guys do that? I love the idea of do you?
Yeah, so everybody's in their offices. We don't, that would be a kind of a crazy cool idea, actually, do like a white elephant party in the entire caucus.
Yeah.
We don't quite go that far, but just in our offices each, we just make sure we take care and understand and go through that process for people in our own staff in our offices.
That's cool. That's good to hear. And as we like to always wrap up talking a little Brewers or baseball, certainly no Brewers necessarily to talk right now, but the winter meetings going on. And one of the bigger free agents out there, Willy Adames, it does look like he is probably going to sign somewhere else, but there are a handful of names out there that the Brewers are being attached to. One of them, Yohan Makata, former White Sox, who's seen better years, but wouldn't be a bad addition in there, part-time even if. But there's the young talent that the Brewers have that they're bringing up that is really impressive and really exciting, I imagine.
Yeah, I think it's all going to depend on where Juan Soto goes and how much money he's going to make over the next quarter century from his massive contract, and then everybody else will start falling into place after that. But yeah, I think the Brewers have some decent options. They don't really have to spend a ton of money on that position because they've got guys like Joey Ortiz could slide over and they could pick up a third baseman if they can't find a top tier shortstop guy. But I don't know. I think they're going to focus too much on the infield instead of, like always, I always say that they don't focus enough on starting pitching and making sure that they can fill that enough that it stays solid through the year. But you just know how the Brewers usually go. So
Yeah, you hope with that new influx of a little bit of new ownership that maybe they show a little bit more. We'll see what happens. I think one of the biggest things, it's almost not so much just who they sign, but seeing them do some things, open the checkbook a little bit. We just saw the A's spend $67 million. I didn't see that coming. You kind of have to. It's not just keeping up with the Joneses; it's keeping up with your own market. You've got the Bucks that are doing well. You've got the Packers doing their thing. Badger sports has just been celebrated, especially with the way the women's and men's basketball and hockey teams are doing. You've got to kind of almost keep up in your own state with this stuff, I would think.
Well, that's funny because we used to, when I was a kid or even just in my young adult years, we always knew that the Wisconsin teams just couldn't compete. They couldn't win. We'd still watch them. We'd still love them. But now they've all gotten to the point where they've either won a championship like the Bucks or in the playoffs every year like the Packers and the Brewers. And now our expectations have changed to say, okay, we better win a championship every year now. So I always try to keep that perspective like, hey, when I was younger, we didn't even make the playoffs. Let's just get there first and see what happens. So,
my nephew, Mason, I was just talking to him about it over Thanksgiving. On his wall, he's got a picture of Christian Yelich, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Jordan Love. And I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, man, this kid, what he's growing up with, the stars and some of the biggest names, if not biggest names in the sports, it's pretty cool. It is a pretty cool time. And the perspective is always appreciated, whether it's about politics or sports or anything else. Always enjoy talking with you, Scott. Have a great weekend and safe travels out there.
Yeah, you too. It's good to talk to you again. You guys all take care, and we'll see you in person soon.
Scott, if people have follow-up questions, would like to reach you and get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, cell phone's always on, 715-323-3293.
Have a great weekend, Scott. We'll talk soon.
You bet. Take care.
Always appreciate the time with Wisconsin State Representative Scott Krug. We'll take a time out. We'll come back with more Midday Magazine here at 97.5 FM, 1320 AM, WFHR. We are locally grown radio.